The Season 3 meta is incredibly diverse, but also frustrating, especially if you're losing to the same characters over and over again, whether it's a Wrecking Ball ruining your backline, or a Pharah Mercy that completely takes over the game. We're going to break down how to counter every single meta character and give you tips and tricks on how to succeed right now. But do me a huge solid and smash that like and subscribe button, and check me out on stream right now in the description down below. Now, the first character that we gotta talk about is Ramattra. Ramattra can be very, very strong in the right hands, but also super frustrating to deal with in the current meta, especially because Ramattra can just run into your backline and kill like DPS and supports very easily. And two, the ultimate sometimes feels unstoppable. So what do you do against Ramattra? The first and most important thing that anyone can do is just to track Ramattra's ultimate. Knowing when Ramattra has an ult makes it so it's so much easier to play around him, because you can position yourself either further away, so it's easier to get out of there, or sandbag certain abilities and ultimates like anti, sleep dart, maybe a defensive ultimate, or something that can actually get the Ramattra killed so that you have the means to shut him down when he pops it. Now, from a strategic point of view, though, to deny Ramattra is to never let him set the pace. Don't play Ramattra's game. Ramattra essentially wants to poke and be safe when he's not in Nemesis, and then set up a key moment where he pops Nemesis and can brawl into you and into your backline. This is exactly what you should not allow Ramattra to do. When he is in Nemesis, you want to distance yourself away from him. Make sure that when he has it or when he's setting up for it, you're not in a position where he can just come in and just kill you. Like if you're an Ana, you need to be playing much further away. If you're a DPS, you need to make sure that you have that distance from him. But once the Ramattra actually doesn't have Nemesis, popped it already, goes back to statically poking, this is when you press up on him. This is when you punish him for his inability to use Nemesis defensively, and you're basically trying to disrupt him being able to set the pace, which is what a Ramattra is always trying to do. And if you do these two things, I think that you'll have a much better time up against Ramattra. Now, moving along, let's talk about another character that can be super frustrating to deal with, Widowmaker, especially when you go up against a really, really great Widowmaker. It seems like no matter what you do, you just play the game and you get headshotted, and that could be super, super frustrating, but there's several things that you can do to deny a Widowmaker value. The first thing and most important thing that you can do is ping a freaking Widowmaker. In fact, most people just don't ping enough, but having everyone on your team know exactly what that Widowmaker is not only going to make it so they can play around that line of sight a lot easier, but your other DPS and characters that can actually directly counter that Widowmaker are going to know exactly where they should be applying pressure, so it's going to be a lot easier for them to deal with the Widowmaker. Now, there is an important distinction that you need to make between characters that can directly do something against a Widow and characters that want to do something based on opportunity, and for the most part, those characters are like just making sure the Widow doesn't get free value on them. So what I mean by that is there are some characters, of course, if you're someone like a Genji, a Tracer, maybe even you're a Zen with freaking charging up a full charge shot, or maybe you're a Winston, like these characters can directly deal with the Widowmaker, right? But a lot of other characters, they can deal with the Widowmaker if the Widowmaker's close, or if the Widowmaker is trying to control space that is nearby on the high ground or something like that. But for the most part, you're just trying to deny LOS. You want to know where she is, and you want to keep it in mind, but you need to just make sure that you're not dying to the Widowmaker. That's your primary job, is to live. But for other characters, Widowmaker always needs to be in the back of your mind, because it's the character that is like the main objective, but you can't always just tunnel vision the Widow, follow her around the map. Oftentimes, you need to deny certain angles from her, put her in a bad situation, and then go for her somewhere in the mid-fight. Now, one of the things that you can do as basically any character that is super important, and I referenced it already, is denying space to the Widow. While a Widowmaker is going to be able to play in some locations that are going to be hard for you to challenge if you don't have a far effective range, you do not want the Widowmaker to be able to take like a cheeky close range off angle or play on the high ground nearby, because these are going to be locations where your teammates are not going to expect them, and when your teammates aren't actively aware of where the Widowmaker is coming from, or if the Widowmaker's in a place where they can get easy shots off, that's where a Widowmaker pops off. And how you deny this is when a Widowmaker shows themselves in these places, you use abilities, use cooldowns, use damage, you ping to force them off the angle as quickly as possible. Don't allow them to get 2, 3, 4, 5 shots off from an aggressive position, because that's how they just dominate the lobby. Now let's move on to another character that actually can just completely dictate the flow of a game, and it's Kiriko. Kiriko is undoubtedly one of the best, if not the best, characters in the game, and many players just fold to a Kiriko because they just don't know how to play around the Kiriko or punish the Kiriko. Now, the first thing that you need to do against the Kiriko, no matter what character you are, is force Suzu and teleport if you can. These are things that are so strong because they can deny an entire play. Your Genji dives on a Kiriko, and, you know, the Kiriko teleports away, and it was just a waste of cooldowns, or even worse, someone like a Doomfist tries to punch 3 people with a charge punch and just completely full whiffs it because of Suzu, and then he ends up dead. Now, it's rather simple to bait out these cooldowns because most Kirikos will use them fairly liberally because they can. Like, if they take a little bit of damage in an aggressive angle, they'll typically teleport. And if they take any damage, whether it's on a shot, getting discorded, getting freaking shot by a DPS, or even just generally applied certain amounts of pressure by a tank, they'll use Suzu. And if you can calm these things and have your team understand that these things are down, now your real execute can come up next. Your real engage can come up next. But the most important thing, though, is try not to go for plays as any character if you don't know whether they have Suzu or not. This is super important. You need to think about the entire enemy team having Suzu, not just Kiriko, because Kiriko could always teleport to them and Suzu them. So you need to be understanding that if you go for an all-in play, and I call an all-in play like a play where you're going into their backline, you're going out on a limb where you either have to pull this play off and it goes well, or if it messes up, you die. Don't go for these plays. Oftentimes, you have to just err on the side of caution until these cooldowns are down and you know for a fact they're down before you commit to something that just all-ins you and gives you no potential recourse if it goes wrong. Now, the next character that we got to talk about in this video is a really frustrating one right now because he just won't freaking die, and it's Wrecking Ball, man. Now, the big problem with Wrecking Ball is that oftentimes players will either not focus him or there'll be like a joint focus, right? Sometimes you'll be shooting at him and maybe you and one other person are shooting at this ball, but this ball will still never die, and you're frustrated because your team's not shooting the ball, and they're frustrated because you're only shooting the ball and it's not doing anything. So everyone's like on the wrong page, right? And that can be really frustrating, but it's up to you to identify, is this Wrecking Ball killable if I do focus it? And if not, I should probably just not focus it at all, because that splitting of the difference is what causes so many disconnects with teams, and it's one of the reasons why Wrecking Ball can roll out an entire lobby because of that disconnect. Now, one of the things you also need to understand is your composition. There are certain compositions that will never ever be able to kill a Wrecking Ball. If you have like Widow Genji in your composition and maybe like a Lucio Mura, you're never, ever going to be able to kill that ball. I promise you, even if every single one of you focus that ball, you're not going to be able to. Now, you could adopt a different pick, and we'll talk about that in a second, but if you don't, you just need to actually ignore the ball for the most part. You could do enough to peel the ball off, but the majority of your time, effort, and focus should be trying to get picks on the enemy team so that the ball is last one standing and no one's at risk of death. Now, I will talk about counter picks because this is a really important one. Oftentimes, there are key swaps you can make that make it so a Wrecking Ball can actually die fairly simple. Think about high damage characters or characters that can punish a ball. Let's talk about a character like Cassidy is pretty good at bursting him down. Characters like Mei can slow down the Wrecking Ball, and Sombra, of course, can outright stop him. Counter picks like Roadhog are actually pretty good against Wrecking Ball, and then from the support side, sleeping a Wrecking Ball is fantastic, even though the nade doesn't do that much. Discording the Wrecking Ball is great, and you could play Zen if the enemy are playing Wrecking Ball without playing like a designated dive. Like, you'll see Wrecking Balls be played with, let's say, a Hanzo and an Ashe, and you could just rock Zen against that all day And not only can you discord that Wrecking Ball perma, but you can also kick him around if he messes up some of his rollouts, which is actually really powerful. And there's ways to just swap your picks up and just completely counter a ball. But if you play a composition 1 that can't kill a Wrecking Ball and try, you're setting yourself up for failure. And 2, focusing the Wrecking Ball when he's really not killable and he keeps getting away at low HP every single time, that is how you ensure a quick loss, and there's nothing you can do about it. But let's talk about another character that feels like there's nothing you could do about them, and it's Pharah. Especially a Pharah Mercy. With the new Mercy changes, sometimes it feels like a Pharah just can't die. And I can't emphasize this enough. Pharah is a team effort. It's not just a hit scan effort. And a lot of players will just want their hit scan to deal with the Pharah. They want one soldier or one cast to deal with the Pharah all by themselves. And it's just not realistic. And I'm not saying this to be like defending the hit scan players by any means. I'm just saying that if you want to freaking win, you need to treat it like the raid boss it is. And that's exactly what the Pharah Mercy is. It's a goddamn raid boss. And here's the things that you need to do. The first thing is you need to not die to their damn spam. They're going to be spamming a lot of choke points, a lot of edges. You have to be very, very careful of just operating in and around any place that can boop you, and making sure that you're really, really careful about peeking into spammed choke points when you're not max HP. This is really important. You don't want that Pharah to get a lot of value. And honestly, even if you don't deal with the Pharah, if the Pharah flies around the battlefield for way too long and doesn't get any value, that's a liability for their team because they're investing a whole support just to enable the Pharah. So the Pharah has to be able to get value, and the more frustrating you make it for that Pharah, the more likely they're going to go in a little bit more aggressively, and actually they're going to be easier for you to punish. But the second thing, and this is a really important part about dealing with Pharah, is it's your job to, 1, make it easier for your hit scan to deal with the Pharah, and 2, deal damage to the Pharah when you can as well. So if you're a support, right, you want to be pocketing your hit scans when they're taking an open angle on the Pharah. Sometimes they'll be playing more out in the open than they normally would because they're trying to get a good line of sight on that Pharah that's playing like up top in the rooftops, and you need to be someone that keeps them alive, because if they just take one tiny bit of spam, then and they have to leave, they're just not going to do any damage, right? They might just get like 1 or 2 shots off, and they have to play a lot better than if they get to stay out in that open for much longer. And 2, from the tank's perspective, the tank needs to try to claim the space in the open to allow the hit scan to deny the Pharah, especially when the Pharah is playing, like I said, up top in a weird angle. So it's really like a team effort, all of y'all combined. And then in addition to that, no matter what role you are, if the Pharah swoops down low, you can always put damage and pressure onto the Pharah. Every little thing counts, because the difference between getting a Pharah at 10 HP and the Pharah just taking a tiny bit of damage, getting discorded, getting shot once by an Ana, getting shot a little tiny bit by a Jungle Queen, it doesn't really matter. Whatever the case may be, getting rid of that Pharah is so freaking important, and every single person can help when that Pharah is in a bad position. Now, the last but certainly not least character that we got to talk about is Zenyatta. And Zenyatta is actually super, super strong in this meta, and he's one of the most frustrating characters to deal with because of how much value he gets just based on being alive. Discord perma on your tank basically makes it so they can't go for plays. They often will lose the tank 1v1, and if you have a Discord on you, you are going to be the target of a dive, and it's going to be pretty brutal. But the first thing that you need to do is, depending on what character you are, especially if you're an aggressive character, you want to actually hide yourself from the front line before you go for a play. I did this a lot on Doomfist, where if I'm trying to go for a dive, I will intentionally get my power punch, then I will deny line of sight from the entire enemy team for a long enough time for the Zen to remove Discord from me, or the Discord to just fade naturally, and then I'll go for a play, because I want that Zen to have to Discord me mid-engage rather than be discorded pre-engage. And denying an LOS before you go for a play is a very common strategy no matter what you are. If you're a Tracer, you want to remove yourself from the fight, get Discord off, and then engage. If you're a Genji, same thing. Pretty much any character is this way. It's all about making it so when you're trying to go for something, you don't actively have Discord on you, and you're not trying to stay in the fight as you have Discord on you. You really want to go in and out of a fight very deliberately, so that at least if the Discord is put on you, it's put during the mid or latter parts of the fight rather than right at the start. Another thing that you need to be aware of is the freaking power of kick. Like, Zen's kick is brutal, and if you don't respect it, a Zen can just chain kick you into a goddamn corner and you're gonna feel pretty silly. And I know this because I've been playing Zen on stream, which I'm gonna be doing right now, so check me out down below. But yeah, you just can actually abuse people with Zen's kick, and it's super strong. But the biggest thing that you need to understand about Zenyatta, especially if you're playing a composition where, like, let's say it's Ramattra v Ramattra or Sigma v Sigma or something along those lines, is if Zen is allowed to live, he provides so much value and pressure. A Zen needs to be actually constantly pressured. And sometimes that means swapping up your pick. Sometimes that means trying to focus on the Zen as much as possible. But if you will just allow a Zen to exist, like if a Zen just gets to be alive, he's going to win the entire game for his team. Sometimes he's a silent carry, but I promise you, if you don't actually put in time and resources into shutting that Zen down, you're gonna lose. So I would highly suggest thinking of a counter plan to deal with him as quickly as possible. But these are the 6 biggest things in the meta that I see that need to be countered right now. But if you have any characters you want me to break down on how to counter, definitely let me know down below. Check me out on stream right now, streaming all roles to GM. And yeah, it'll be in the description down below. And thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.